What's happening, y'all? It's your boy nightgod 333 Secrets Revealed, bringing you the most fringe content on the internet. If it's your first time here and you like the unknown and unexplained, do me a solid, subscribe, like, hit that notification bell so you get notified every time I post, because you don't want to miss any of my upcoming content. I promise. Please do me a solid, guys. Like, subscribe, comment on this post, get us some interaction, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you get notified every time I post. It helps the channel immensely. Thank you, guys. Love you. Hope you enjoy this video. This is the legend of the Navigator who crossed the Icewalls and the 14,000. Lands of the Orion, located to the west of the known lands, as you can see behind me. These lands are dominated by beings known as the Greys, typically small in stature, standing between 1.3 and 1.4 meters in height. They are highly advanced, both psychologically, telepathically, and scientifically, boasting laboratories that are among the most sophisticated within the entire Great Dome. The Greys possess extensive knowledge of many races, obtained through relentless experimentation, and the Custodians have frequently exploited this expertise in their obsessive pursuit in attempts to penetrate the celestial lands. Despite their efforts, all attempts have failed, leading to many Greys turning their focus to analysis on humans. They conduct abductions and genetic tests, lacking empathy and often exhibiting hostility towards us. Compassion from them is rare, and numerous abductees report terrifying experiences. The Greys have been experimenting on humans for a long time, thousands of years, even before the last reset and previous ones. They are closely related to the beings from Zeta Reticuli, with their races intermingling and coexisting today. In the past, the Anunnaki colonized the beings of Zeta Reticuli, utilizing them for exploration, while the Orion Greys continue and served the Custodians. Prior to the Great War, the Greys briefly controlled the known lands in place of the Custodians, while they and the Anunnaki leaders were at war over a disagreement. The war lasted approximately 5,000 years. Eventually, this would lead to the Giants and humans initiating an uprising against the Greys. This was during the era of the Great Advanced Tartary, a period of free energy and superior technology. Their ships were destroyed by the thousands each day, so the Greys, unable to keep the Tartarians at bay, eventually had to relay this news to the Custodians and had to tell them they lost control of the known lands. Ultimately, they were expelled from the known lands by the Giants. When the already rebellious humans revolted, defeating the Orion Greys, they inadvertently empowered the Tartarians, causing a much harder fought battle for the Custodians afterwards. Mind you, they were just coming off of another war. This fostered a mutual hatred between the Giants and the Greys, a sentiment that persists today despite occasional meetings. During this war, the greatest leader of the Greys perished in the known lands. This intensified their animosity towards humanity and the Tartarians. Eventually, the Greys would be allowed to colonize independent lands again, but the Custodians treat them accordingly for their plight of the known lands, while they were supposed to be in charge. They have never trusted them to look over any other circle environment ever again in their stead. Despite their hostility towards humans, in recent history, there was a technological exchange between Grey alien leaders and humans. But unfortunately, this technology fell into the wrong hands, that being the cloning ability, and the elite used it destructively. Greys are also present in the Mars lands, a joint experimental site controlled by the Custodians and the Anunnaki. Human colonists there frequently clashed with the Greys and were consistently defeated. The Greys survived through cloning and functioned robotically, devoid of emotions or empathy, and nearly faced total extermination in the recent past. Next, we have the Pleiadians. These are tall beings, similar in appearance to the Norse from Norse mythology, believed to be descendants of those who survived the Battle of Asgard against the Custodians and fled to the Pleiades. Generally benevolent towards humans, they made a peace pact with the Anunnaki early in their development. Despite their spiritual focus and efforts to improve living conditions, Pleiadians suffer from natural disasters thought to be manipulated and facilitated by the Anunnaki, probably through pyramids. Their lands face accelerated destruction, possibly forcing them to seek refuge in the known lands. Although they visit occasionally, they are uncomfortable coexisting with humans and have failed to find a suitable alternative home. Next, we have the Land of the Clones, the Second Earth. This peculiar world, known as the first Mars Earth, began as an experimental project. Initially left unused, it later became a model for the Mars Earths. The Anunnaki were the first to explore this unique circle environment, discovering primitive life forms. The planet was initially used to relocate dominant races for conflict resolution and interracial development experiments. Unfortunately, these efforts failed, nearly leading to its destruction. Subsequently, it served as a cloning ground to preserve the lives of important leaders across various races, earning its name. However, a crisis arose when the cloned beings, including humans, escaped. These clones, devoid of feelings or empathy, caused significant unrest across worlds. Today, this experimental land is abandoned, one of the many forgotten territories that might one day be repurposed. The Pleiadians have considered it for mass relocation, but the conditions are unknown, and the abandoned laboratories leave its future uncertain. They say that some of the beings may still be living there, and who knows what type of abominations were created and left to breed and interbreed and become something chimera-esque, if you will. The next faction we're going to talk about is similar to that of the Custodians. They are often called this same exact thing, reptilians. I believe that the reptilians are actually just more primitive versions of the Custodians. Often confused with the Anunnaki, reptilians are distinct beings who reside far from the known lands. Despite occasional contact with leaders in other worlds, they prefer isolation, living mostly in underground homes. They are advanced and hostile towards humans. They establish subterranean bases for future use, utilizing their superior technology for monitoring us. Their primary domain is the Lacerta lands, although many prefer the island nearby, where they have constructed a vast underground city. Historically, they have engaged in significant wars with the Anunnaki and are known for their advanced weaponry. Respected by colonizers, they have never been subjugated or used for menial tasks. If a future conflict with humanity arises, they might ally with the Custodians. So when I hear that they are underground dwellers and they dig and build subterranean cities, I can't help but think about the subterranean city under, I want to say LA, where somebody explored the catacombs and they found reptilian skulls, a bunch of gold, and basically a subterranean city below LA. I'm imagining that these are the same beings, right, that built this subterranean city under LA. Next, we have the Celestial Lands. Many worlds are excluded from this book, but will be detailed soon. Numerous extraterrestrial races struggle to survive in a system where fate seems governed by chance. Despite this, some worlds experience peace and development, possibly due to lesser interest from the parasitic races or their unnoticed development. Other lands, as discussed, were devastated by the parasites before they could fully develop. Their history stained with blood, and their futures irrevocably altered. Humanity's spirit remains unbroken despite losing its kingdom long ago. The ongoing spiritual depletion threatens our existence, not physically, but by eroding our awareness of our potential. We must learn from races that overcame their oppressors and adopt their techniques to resist manipulation and oppression. Many are willing to aid humanity's awakening and liberation. Colonizers fear us because they cannot manipulate our essence, our soul, only our physical surroundings. It is time to awaken and realize our true potential. Why don't official sources inform us about these worlds, and why do they visit our lands? These questions are somewhat complex, but an attempt to answer them can easily be made. There are many continents hidden behind what is known as barriers or walls. These barriers can be made of ice, like those in Antarctica, or mountains. There are several types of these barriers, both within the known world and beyond it. Helen has visited these lands numerous times and considers herself part of our world. Her ancestors visited other worlds repeatedly, encountering thousands of races in both friendly and cruel ways. Helen feels a deep connection to our lands, as her ancestors were born and lived here until the end. Since childhood, she has been motivated by the idea of returning to the soil and the earth of her mother and grandparents, who sacrificed their lives for the freedom of their race. Helen's father, William Morris, was born in these lands, like many others. He was fortunate enough to cross the artificial ice walls imposed by the same parasites that control them today and managed to find their ancestral lands. Referred to as the Ancestral Republic, there he met Helen's mother and formed a great family. Helen cherishes the memories of her dear father and hopes that over time, more people will come to know about the lands where she was born, the ancestral lands. Helen's father, at the age of 34 and with significant experience in the Continental Navy, met a man named Butler. Captain Butler, who had also been born in Helen's homeland, was infiltrated in those lands. For reasons undisclosed, Butler assembled a team experienced in warfare and maritime navigation. Despite numerous complications and threats, they managed to enter the polar zone, cross the ice walls, and find their ancestral lands. Helen's father succeeded more easily under the guidance of Butler, an experienced captain well-versed in the route. Contrary to the seemingly random events described in The Navigators Who Crossed the Ice Walls, Butler was a seasoned navigator and a leader of the Naval Council in Helen's homeland. He had visited the known lands many times, contributing significantly to the plan he devised with Helen's father to infiltrate and execute their mission. Together they fought for their homeland, which they cherished despite the oppressive ruling race that hindered its development, the Custodians. Helen believes these lands rightfully belong to the true humanity, not those who blindly follow imposed rules. That's us. According to the decrees from the celestial lands to Hyperborea, humans should not seek escape, but rather subdue and expel their colonizers. Recognizing the complexity of this task, an alternative plan was to relocate humanity before the next reset. The known lands and many foreign continents carry different names than those taught in stories. Despite some mythical elements, Helen prefers the name Ancestral Republic for her homeland, representing the surviving human ancestors from before the last reset, the Great Tartary. Her ancestors were born before the walls of ice, fought and sometimes died there. Countless tales of great heroes forged in these lands persist, just as heroes have emerged in Helen's homeland who perform great deeds in these regions. Helen speaks English, though a different native language is primarily spoken in her homeland's main city. Many languages from the known lands are also spoken there. Her parents fled these lands to start anew in the outer lands, escaping from all corners of the known world. Initially, communities formed based on culture, creating their own languages and cultures to foster unity and avoid divisions among ancestral humans. Over time, many adopted the native language, often forgetting their forefathers' tongues, particularly in larger cities, though efforts continued to preserve connections with the past. Helen's parents escaped the worst war ever seen, having no alternative but to flee or die. Her grandfather perished in that battle, and her mother escaped as a small child in her grandmother's arms, with many saved by the giants, for which they are eternally grateful. The giant race joined humanity during the previous reset, coming from outside to free them from the oppressive Custodians. Those giants would be the Anakim, a very, very old race of giants, very highly technologically advanced. These beings are feared by the Anunnaki and the reptilians. In one of his most recent books, Mr. Nocelli provided us with a, of course, fictional timeline of humanity, how long they lasted, when they were established, when they were reset, and the cycle length. I found this to be very, very enlightening and intriguing. So let's go ahead and go over it. First humanity of Hyperborea, Asgard. Asgard, I will show you on a map here, was the start of 14,000 BC. So 14,000 years before Christ. That's not that long ago, guys, if you think about it. If you really sit back and think about it. The way we build our timelines, that's not very long ago. The reset was in 542 BC, down to the exact year. The cycle length, 1,458 years. So could you imagine, back then, these beings lived 253, maybe even 400 years old? You'd have a pretty good chance of catching a reset if you live that long, right? It's kind of a crazy thought. After that reset, wow, they established the first generation the same year. So what they do is, allegedly, they wipe out everybody except for the infants that are a year old or younger, or 7 months old or younger. They keep them, they raise them, and they reestablish the population with them. First generation, start, same year. Reset, 11,089. Cycle length, almost exact down to the year, about 5 years earlier than the last. Second generation, 1189 before Christ. Reset, 9531 BC. Cycle length, they got a little extra out of this one, 1,558 years. So there's an obvious pattern here, close to a millennium and a half. Third generation, again, established and started the same year as the reset. Now the resets here aren't all floods either, keep in mind. A lot of them were nuclear. So the third generation established, and the cycle length was 1475 years. The fourth generation, now we're getting a little better. 1681 years, getting a little lax. The fifth generation, now this is the generation that almost got our lands back permanently. So the sixth generation, 4742 BC, reset 1728 AD. You heard me right. 4742 before Christ. Status 2024, cycle time to date 296 years. So hopefully we got a lot of time left, but they can reset us at any time, allegedly. Summary of resets. Reset of the first humanity of Hyperborea Asgard event, colonization by the Custodians, destruction of the advanced civilization. Reset of the first generation event, increase of forbidden knowledge. Duration of the cycle. So they started contacting outside the ice wall. The next generation event, contact with extraterrestrials, increase of critical thinking. 1558 years. Reset of the third generation event, rediscovery of the true nature of the dome. Rebellions. The true nature of the dome. Interesting. Reset of the fourth generation event, war. External intervention of archons, giant beings. Reset of the fifth generation event, internal conflicts, external alliances, increase of spiritual knowledge. This is what has led up to it. Everything I'm reading leads up to it and is why they were reset. The sixth generation reset, the Great Tartary event, great war against the Custodians and Anunnaki, intervention of the Anakin Giants, creation of an advanced empire. Cycle time 6,470 years. Due to the conflict between the Custodians and the Anunnaki, the human colony was relegated from custodial control, passing into the hands of the Orion Greys temporarily. For that reason, many years of advancement were reached. The Anakin giant race joined humanity during the previous reset, coming from outside to free them from oppressive custodian rule. They believed it was the right time to unite and wait for the custodial return from the masters. The Great Tartary, erased from maps and history, represented the perfect union of giants and humans. The history of giants or giant humans was hidden or manipulated with myths, sentencing them as enemies of the gods. In reality, the true enemies were the colonizers who hindered the free development of races and spiritual growth, not only in the known lands but also in many others. Giants chose to remain hidden to avoid further harm to humanity. The past failures have caused a high price, staining the oceans with ancestral blood. These lands known to Helen have suffered greatly, but they once held hopes of achieving external freedom. The Great War began so suddenly that there was no time to comprehend the events that unfolded surrounding it. The Custodians launched their attack on the major cities, aiming to weaken the central power. Giants had warned the humans of the Custodians' plan to contaminate the air, but knowledge about the Custodians' greed and hostility had been limited. With the help of the giants, humans gradually learned from the Custodians information acquired before the war. An inferior race controlled the lands and maximized their potential rapidly, the Orion Greys. The Great Tartary's advancement was well organized and swift, considering the harsh conditions. Now, that is because they went through and they found catacombs and went into the pyramids and found super advanced technology left behind by the Custodians and the Anunnaki. They reverse engineered it and were able to create new and more advanced weaponry. This gave them great advantage, especially learning how to get energy from the ether. Before the creation of the ice walls, continents looked different, and the environment was manipulated after the Custodians came close to losing their colony to the giant barbarians and the humans they detested. Ancient cities were invaded by black smoke, and giants brought advanced technology to Tartary, sharing knowledge that humans had never seen before. Despite expecting the Great War, the attack came suddenly, catching everyone off guard. The Custodians and their lackeys, the Greys, could not withstand the power of the Anakim, the giants who assisted humans with their technology. Not all giants participated in the war, and many later split due to disagreements. The hope of defeating the Custodians was strong, filling everyone with a priceless sense of potential freedom. The war, however, was the cruelest ever fought, leading to a devastating reset and a new beginning. The current oppressive system, which degrades humans spiritually and controls minds, stems from the Custodians' fear of losing their best colony. This manipulation is evident in the power of the media and so-called experts who reinforce the lies, making it difficult for people to question or resist the imposed falsehoods. Helen's mother often recounts stories of their ancestors' struggle. The previous reset was the harshest, as humans and giants had once controlled the situation. When the central power fell, millions died, making recovery difficult. Helen's mother, a newborn at the time, was carried to safety by her grandmother, saved by the giants. The giant race joined humans during the previous reset, aiming to free them from the Custodians' oppression. The Great Tartary was a union of giants and humans, whose history was later erased or manipulated. Giants chose to remain hidden to avoid harming the humans more, and the lands and ancestral blood were stained and lost the hope of achieving freedom. Helen's father, William, returned to his birthplace longing to help those who he left behind. He was tormented by the knowledge of his brothers suffering under wars, manipulation, and pestilence. Fearing the loss of their colony, they reinforced the walls and military bases, creating treaties and barriers to prevent humans from learning the truth. Despite these measures, about 14,000 infiltrated ancestors continued to support the mission for human liberation. However, an incident near the Antarctic Peninsula revealed their presence, leading to a crackdown. The Custodians used advanced technology to control humanity, complicating the liberation plan. Some infiltrators had to return, and many died labeled as traitors. So on this last trip with Captain Butler and William Morris, Captain Butler would return from this trip alone. Helen's eyes filled with tears knowing that her father was lost. Helen saw Butler approach her and her mother looking defeated, his eyes bloodshot. He was also wounded in an arm and a leg. Those 10 or 15 meters felt like an eternity. When he finally reached them, he looked up and couldn't hold back his tears. He told them that Helen's father had died in the known lands near the Antarctic zone due to the custodial military technology. The Custodians had supplied advanced technology to commandos and military leaders of certain countries, technology they did not even know how to use. This posed a severe danger to all life within the walled lands. The Custodians realized this was a significant mistake, risking their own colony in the process. Although experienced in war, they underestimated the potential of a race to overcome them or the danger of losing those lands. In their desperation, they gave this unknown technology to the new humanity to counter the returning ancestors and other humans. The Custodians also shared knowledge of weather modification and environmental manipulation. The ship Iron Blue, carrying Helen's father, some ancestors, and humans of the new reset, disintegrated in midair while crossing the Antarctic skies. An invisible barrier created by the Custodians just before the dome caused this destruction. At the time, the barrier was unknown, leading to the loss of dozens of ships. Butler, returning on another ship, survived by a miracle and recounted Helen's father's death in detail. It was the worst moment of Helen's life. She felt immense frustration and helplessness towards the known lands. She lost faith in the Custodians and the new humanity, questioning whether her father's death was worth it for a cause that seemed doomed. Over time, Helen came to understand and feel in her heart that she was part of these lands. She realized her father wanted humanity to be freed forever, just as she did now. The technology given by the Custodians caused conflicts within the known lands, with countries using it to threaten and attack each other. This technology also made ships, planes, and people disappear, disintegrating them. The knowledge of climate and environmental manipulation added to the chaos, creating an era of turmoil that persists today. Since then, there has been a fear that humanity might be destroyed in an absurd war using biological weapons, or that the Custodians might decide to reset out of fear of extermination. There was also the concern that humans might use this technology to attack the Custodians, although this is a least likely scenario. Helen knew that after the incident at the Antarctic Peninsula, the Custodians launched a massive crackdown. With fabricated lies and flimsy excuses, they stormed homes in countless countries, fearing that they were hiding members of the resistance. For over a decade, they scoured every corner for clues, using advanced technology to monitor and control the movements of the new humanity. Although they possessed such technology, the Custodians reinforced it significantly after the Peninsula incident. This development severely complicated the plan. It was a major setback, as Helen and her allies had people strategically infiltrated in the highest levels of power: politics, secret societies, organizations, companies, universities, and even more. The Resistance had been using their own technology to counteract custodial detection, making significant progress in preparing for the eventual transfer of many of those who were beginning to awaken to the truth. But the incident forced them to realize how delicate their situation had become. Any misstep could lead to an immediate reset. Initially, overcoming the barriers, military bases, and custodial technology, which included radars capable of causing earthquakes, was not a significant problem. The Resistance had managed to bypass these obstacles repeatedly. But then the inevitable happened. An alarm was triggered by an earthquake near what the Custodians knew as the Antarctic Peninsula, but which Helen's people referred to as False Antarctica. A group of travelers from the Ancestral Republic encountered a military base while patrolling the area in an icebreaker. When the group attempted to escape, the Custodians' forces sank their ship, and the consequences reverberated through the highest circles of power. The Custodians began hunting down everyone involved, searching every conceivable hiding place. They intensified their efforts, spreading fear and tightening their grip. They invaded homes, using technology to track the Resistance movement more effectively than ever before. This escalation threw a wrench into the Resistance's plans. Many of the 14,000 infiltrators were forced to return, and fear became a harsh reality. Some of Helen's ancestors were captured and executed as traitors, suffering unimaginable tortures that she chose not to detail here. Upon Captain Butler's return, he would be alone, without William Morris. A day Helen would never forget. Her eyes filled with tears as she realized she would never see her father again. Butler approached Helen and her mother, his face drawn, his eyes bloodshot. He was wounded in his arm and his leg. The 10 or 15 meters he walked towards them felt like an eternity. When he finally reached them, Butler looked up, unable to hold back his tears. He told them that Helen's father had died in the known lands, killed by custodial military technology near the Antarctic zone. The Custodians, in their desperation, had handed advanced technology to commandos and military leaders in certain countries. Technology that these leaders didn't even know how to use. This recklessness was extremely dangerous for all of life within the walled lands. The Custodians knew that giving such power to the new humanity would be a grave mistake, one that even threatened their own colony. But in their arrogance, they never considered the possibility that a race could overcome them, nor did they fully grasp the dangers of losing control of these lands. Questioning whether her father's death had been in vain for a cause that seemed doomed from the start. But as time passed, Helen came to understand. She felt it in her heart. She knew that she too was part of these lands, just as her father had been, and she realized that he had died for something much greater, a dream of humanity's ultimate liberation. Now more than ever, she was determined to carry on that fight, to ensure that humanity would be freed forever. Despite the setbacks and losses, the fight against the Custodians has never ceased. The Resistance remains steadfast, driven by the memory of those who had fought and sacrificed. The plan to liberate humanity is continuing, fueled by the desire for the true freedom and spiritual growth. Helen knew that the struggle was far from over, but she was ready to carry on the legacy of her fathers and the others who had come before her. So I hope y'all enjoyed that video and got some interesting information, whether it's true or not. One of the most fascinating things I found about what I just read or talked about was the fact that Jesus actually allegedly arrived during the Sixth Generation's Great Run, the Great Tartary. I just find that very fascinating, and it was at the latter of their run. So it makes you wonder, was he sent during the Great War? Was he sent at the beginning, at the end? And if he was, then that makes sense as to why they crucified him. But if the Great Tartary was in control, you can't help but wonder where Pontius Pilate was influenced and by who. It's very interesting to me they sent Jesus, whoever it was, to show the Great Tartary what humanity was possibly capable of if they would find their spirituality, is what I believe. But it's crazy he did all these amazing things during the Great Tartary's run while the Anakin Giants were here. Also, I wanted to touch on the 14,000 ancestors that were sent here in infiltrated society right after the Great Reset, the flood. And it would have been about the right timing because 1728, then they infiltrated. And then what happened? The Revolutionary War. I've always wondered if we're being ran by an evil faction or if we're being oppressed or influenced by a negative faction, then how did the United States come to be? How did it happen to where there was democracy and freedom and the Constitution was written up, the right to bear arms, the freedom to be, the freedom in pursuit of happiness, the right to pursuit of happiness, free speech, all of the above? Those aren't negative or constitutional rights. I've often wondered that as I've found out more and more about what's going on here. And now I know the answer. Some of the men who wrote the Constitution, our founding fathers, allegedly and arguably may have been some of the ancestors from the previous civilization. It's hard to say. This is all just speculation. This is all just fantastical thought and theory. You know what I'm saying? It's all just theory, and it's for fun. So don't take it too literally, but I've often wondered that. You know, they planted people in certain places. You heard them in universities, politicians, you name it, media, celebrities, and they influenced society, and it had to have been for the positive. So it answers the question to me. A consistently asked question in my own mind was, how did the ideals of our country, one of the first countries to do so, get established? It makes total sense now. It's just wild as we go through this story, the dots that I've connected, the more I learned. Something to think about. Let me know what you think in the comments. Obviously, for entertainment purposes only, this may or may not be true. It's all theory and speculation, and it's just for fun. It's fringe, it's esoteric, it's just interesting to talk about, right? I hope you enjoyed the video. And bear with me, guys. I'm working on not reading the scripts. It's going to take some time. It's hard to do, but I'm getting there. It's impossible to memorize them, so sometimes I do have to read. I'm trying to present it in a way that I'm not, but sometimes it may just seem that way. But I hope the information makes up for it. All right. Stay in the love. Stay in the light. Be kind to others. And until next time, I am out.